I'm sure it's just a coincidence that you're playing something from The Cure as we're trying to cure what ails college football.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Thank you, Marvin. Thank you. We were just reminiscing about the Big East. Remember? Obviously you do if you're a sports fan. Big East, best basketball conference ever. And then what dismantled the Big East? All of these schools, well, Connecticut, you want to get that football money. And then all of a sudden you're looking at, Georgetown doesn't play football and Villanova doesn't play football. You had these Big East schools, St. John's doesn't play football. You had the perfect model for, hey, this is a basketball conference. You want to play other sports in other conferences? Go get them. And then I saw Dan Wetzel from Yahoo Sports. He wrote about, how about football conference? Can we do that? Because other schools, Notre Dame will play independent, but they're going to play basketball in the ACC. But they may play a couple of ACC schools. Like, why do we have to do this? We thought we'd bring in Dan Wetzel, Yahoo Sports columnist, New York Times best-selling author. Okay. How do we go about this? That it seems logical that you have a football conference and then maybe you have basketball conferences. Why can't we do this?
Okay, well, the first thing you got to remember about college athletics, no one is in charge. There is no one driving this boat. There's no Roger Goodell. There's no Adam Silver. There is an NCAA president, but that's just a figurehead. There are a whole bunch of fiefdoms. So even a good idea that literally everyone agrees would make sense. No one thinks Rutgers should be playing Oregon in volleyball. Nobody thinks that. Yet, here we are. You mentioned the Big East, a very interesting example of this. University of Connecticut, 4 national titles while they're in the Big East. Then they go play in the AAC because of football. They're trying to find a home for football. They're still playing good basketball teams. Houston, Memphis, things like that. But they're no longer in the Big East, and they lose touch with the recruits in their area, New York and all that. Yeah. They give up the AAC, return back for basketball in the Big East. Who's your national champion? Connecticut. It just makes sense sometimes for certain leagues, let alone all of your Olympic sports. There's no hockey does this, right? Hockey East has teams from the ACC, the Big East, the Atlantic 10. They have FCS, like 1AA teams. They have Division II teams. It's okay. It works because it's just a hockey league. Nobody really is paying attention. But for all these other ones, we just can't do it because no one can go, guys, what are we doing here?
Let me give you total autonomy. Where do you start?
For this problem?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot on the checklist.
Let me just do, let's just stay with football, realignment, just football schools.
Yeah, I would actually probably create some kind of like regional. There's actually one out west called the Mountain Pack that handles sort of these excess sports that not everyone does, beach volleyball, water polo. I would probably create some like regional, 6 or 7 regional kind of umbrellas that handle those areas. So let's take the state of Texas, right? You pretty much just need Texas college athletics. And then if in football or basketball, you want to travel all over, knock yourself out. But if you're talking about playing a men's soccer game, there's no need for Baylor to put their men's soccer team on a plane to go play Central Florida, and Texas, which is 90 minutes away, to put their men's soccer team on a plane and fly to Florida to play them. They could be on the same plane when you could just have a little bus. So I would probably regionalize Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, deep south, whatever you do, and break it up that way, and then have your football and your men's basketball leagues that work in conjunction to that.
The ACC reaching out apparently to Stanford and Cal.
Yeah.
Is that real?
Nothing says Atlantic Coast,
I know.
Dan, like the fog coming in off the San Francisco Bay. It's real because why not? So there's an example of maybe you just add football, but Stanford and Cal need something for their Olympic programs because those teams are top of the class, national championship caliber, and they need competition. The closest they can get is the ACC. It's real. I don't know if it happens. You somehow have to come up with a cost ability to send people, but Stanford and Cal are in a world of trouble trying to find equal talent for their soccer, their volleyball, their swimming programs that are as good as any in the country. The concept of putting someone flying 3,000 miles for every single road game is lunacy. I mean, look, if you're going to one of those schools, Cal or Stanford, you are almost by definition academically minded. The last thing you want to be when you're at Stanford is not at Stanford, missing the classes, being exhausted flying back because you had a volleyball game at Virginia Tech last night. Those things would just seem, I mean, this is not college athletics in any form.
Why wouldn't Stanford just go independent?
They can, but it'd be pretty much the similar thing. Their problem is they'll get almost no football television revenue. It works for Notre Dame because NBC is willing to pay them.
Yeah.
And then they got an NBC deal coming in 2 years that'll probably be more. They could fund their athletic department off of football. Stanford's not going to, people aren't going to pay for Stanford home games the way they pay for Notre Dame home games.
We're talking to Dan Wetzel, Yahoo Sports columnist, trying to figure out, it feels like if there's another domino or two, it's with Florida State and Clemson. And I was told, you know, the SEC may just block this so the Big Ten doesn't get into their footprint there with Florida State and Clemson. I don't know what happens with the ACC. I don't, you know, there's contracts, but we've seen those contracts broken. It feels like Florida State is adamant that they're out of there. The question is when, and then what's the SEC do or what's the Big Ten do? Feels like those are the only two players here. What do you think happens with these schools?
There's definitely one more round here, the other being Notre Dame. Does Notre Dame ever have to join? And the SEC and Big Ten will wage, no pun intended, a holy war trying to get Notre Dame, to convince Notre Dame they should join their league and the other. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina is very appealing to these leagues. Virginia, here's the thing. I just announced 6 schools that are all very appealing. They all play football against each other. There should be room for a third league. You know, you still have Duke and Carolina basketball. I mean, imagine a world where we know football destroys the Carolina Duke basketball rivalry. Now they could still play twice a year and stuff, but some of this stuff just doesn't, you know, it's hard to deal with. Right now the ACC is stuck with each other, and Florida State is raising a lot of noise, and they're saying we're going to get out. If they could get out, they'd be out. They don't have a way out. They're not bluffing, but this deal runs through 2036, and it is so even, you know, over the next few years, and I know this is hopelessly naive, and you can have me back on to heckle me in like 2 minutes when we've announced Clemson and Florida State have left, but it seems like they're stuck. And so that's where you're at. I will say this, the SEC is quite happy with where they're at. They're adding Texas and Oklahoma. They have 16 teams. They win all the championships. They have an enormous amount of money coming in. Their league still makes sense. It's still a Southern-based, big state school league, pretty much. It's the Big Ten that's just all over the map. And the Big Ten is like a house that keeps adding on additions, but bringing in different architects. So they brought in Rutgers and Maryland. They're on the East Coast for basic cable homes 10 years ago. Now they're out West with 4 teams. They brought Nebraska in to be a national power and help push Ohio State and Michigan. They've had 7 straight losing seasons. The Big Ten one is all over the map. The SEC is very purposeful. It's basically worked. It's going fine. And they're kind of looking back, laughing and going, when we want somebody, we're going to go get them. But you are right. At some point, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina is, again, very, very appealing because of the size of the market, the academics, and then Notre Dame. That's going to be the next wave. They just released a poll yesterday, preseason poll. 11 of the top 15 are in either the SEC or the new SEC or the new Big Ten starting next year. And then there's Notre Dame, and then there's 3 others. So the 2 super conferences are either here or essentially here.
Plus, wait till March Madness when these conferences dominate, you know, the number of schools that get into March Madness.
That they will dominate some, but like the Big 12 and the Big East and Gonzaga, basketball is a different thing, and that's why. Because you can say, look, Minnesota has $70 million in revenue coming in every year, but Connecticut's 2 hours from New York City. So there's other things that make this work. The Big 12 will be the best basketball conference. Not only they have Baylor and Kansas and Iowa State, they just added Arizona
yeah.
and all these things. So basketball is its own thing. Hockey, that's just why I'm saying hockey's its own thing. Let football be its own thing. Let baseball be its own thing. Let women's field hockey be. There's no sense, and we've seen this with Boston College. It's never made any sense that Boston College sends their tennis team to play Florida State when they could get on a bus and ride down to Providence College and have a nice match on Tuesday afternoon. And everyone gets back to campus.
But that would make sense, Dan, and college sports does not make sense.
No one is in charge.
It makes money.
You should be in charge.
Yeah.
You should be in charge.
Yeah,
Dan.
exactly. That's what I want to do when I retire. Great to talk to you, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
Always fun. Thanks,
And
Dan.
that's Dan Wetzel, Yahoo Sports national columnist. He's always got some ideas here on how to make things better. It's just, I don't know if there's any real think tank that they get together and they go, okay, what would actually would be better for college athletics? Not my school individually, but the totality of college athletics.